Morning, everyone. Thought we'd start with a simple but effective quote from one of my favorite books, The Road Less Traveled. Life is difficult. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. Here's a quote from our founder. God is not stupid. Don't make excuses before him. God will not make excuses, even though man may cause damage to his promise. You must take that degree of responsibility too. In the Unification Church, there are many different kinds of people. Western people, Eastern people, people of mixed colors, and so forth. What did you come together here to do? Why did you come? I remember going to one of our founders' talks when I was living in New York. And we would gather in a cold, converted barn up in New York in the middle of winter at 5 o'clock in the morning. And the question, why am I doing this, would sometimes come to my mind. And here's the answer. Why did you come? Even if you meet me, all I can give you is curses. I only have insults to give you. But you still like it, and you come here. Why is that? You are gathering here in search of love. You are coming for true love. You know the taste. It is like bees. Once they taste the nectar of a flower, they will follow the fragrance of the flowers even for hundreds of miles, without feeling that distance is too great. It is not easy to be true parents. I would willingly hand over the authority of the true parents. So if there is if there is some representative here who wants to take it, please step forward. I never thought about becoming the true parent, but as it turned out, I could not avoid taking responsibility for the Unification Church. And so on the way, I found myself as the true parent. That pretty much sums up the reality for a lot of people who are mission-orientated and along the path of wanting to fulfill their mission, they get thrust into the leadership position. Not because they were trying to seek the leadership position, but simply because that came upon them on their journey towards their real goal. So, here are some thoughts I had about taking responsibility, which, by the way, is the topic. I don't know if that came up, that slide at the beginning. Taking responsibility is the topic of today's talk. So, we are more powerful than we really understand. There's a book out there called The Butterfly Effect, which basically expounds this idea that one small action on one side of the globe affects things on the other. There's also a well-documented phenomena in quantum physics called the observer effect. I want to read a little bit about it. Rehovot, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, but that's in Israel. February the 26th, 1998. One of the most bizarre premises of quantum theory, which has long fascinated philosophers and physicists alike, states by the very act of watching, the observer affects the observed reality. In a study reported in the February 26th issue of Nature, researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science have now conducted a highly controlled experiment demonstrating how a beam of electrons is affected by the act of being observed. The experiment revealed that the greater the amount of watching, the greater the observer's influence on what actually takes place. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole experiment, but It's a fascinating premise that we are co-creators and we are influencing our reality. There's a lot of documented evidence that the reality that we live in affects our minds, it affects our spirits, but it also works in reverse. And we have a tremendous, profound impact on so-called reality around us. And this is proven on a quantum level. And in fact, the fascinating thing about quantum physics is that it's basically dealing with the smallest particles of matter. And it turns out that it comes down to energy. Everything is basically built up of this invisible force called energy. And your mind is a form of energy, and the world around you is a form of energy, and solid matter, it turns out, isn't really that solid after all. In fact, it's made up of 99% energy. And so the idea that we, a conscious being, can shape and influence energy is not such a stretch of an idea after all. And so this is being explored. So some thoughts about taking responsibility. If we could really understand how powerful we are, maybe we would act differently. If we could understand how powerful our thoughts are, maybe we would choose different thoughts. It's believed that we're all floating in this kind of atmosphere of physical reality, but also spiritual or emotional reality. And our minds are connected to the emotional sphere, and our bodies are more connected to the substantial physical sphere. And so this is the reason why we are vibrating at a certain frequency. And if you are vibrating at a low frequency, you find yourself attracting some really disastrous thoughts about yourself and the world around you. Oh my God, everything's going bad. You know, we've all been there. I don't need to elaborate. And then again, some days, when you're vibrating at a higher frequency, you look out the window and it's just a beautiful day. It's raining, but it's a beautiful day. Why is that? It's because of our minds and our hearts, and it's all to do with the frequency that you're vibrating at. And you also find yourself attracting good things into your life when you're vibrating at that level. And on the other hand, we have those days where it's all happening bad to me today. I woke up and my coffee machine broke, and I had a flat tire on my way to work, and then somebody rear-ended me, and then I got to my job late and I was fired, and it's just, you know. So, taking responsibility is the idea that you can affect your reality. It's a pretty painful proposition because it means that we have to lose our story. What is our story? Well, for some of us, our story really defines who we are. We are a victim of our circumstances. We are a victim of our society. We are a victim of our government. We are a victim of this. We are a victim of that. My mother loved my sister better. You know, we're a victim. You know, from the day we were born, bad things have been going on in my life. And it's not my fault. In order to take responsibility, we have to let go of that attractive story that explains everything that's gone wrong in my life. Right? We have to let that go, and we have to shape ourselves and mold ourselves according to what we know would be a better, more ideal fit for us. Going back to quantum physics, when you look at yourself in the mirror, what do you see? Do you see a slightly pudgy, overweight version of yourself with love handles? Or do you see a slimmer, more idealized version of yourself? Which one is real? Well, from a quantum physics point of view, they're all real. And everything in between, those two extremes. And the reason for that is because we are shaping our reality, whether we realize it or not. And the more we can realize and accept that and embrace that idea, just like the woman in that T.S. Eliot play, the more we can start to affect and change our reality for the better. But we have to let go of our story. Taking responsibility is very difficult. And we really don't have role models to guide us. Taking responsibility, a person that takes responsibility sometimes has to go through fire and fury in order to get to the other side of that chasm. And that's not an easy thing to do. And how many role models in society do we see who are taking responsibility, enduring the pain of doing so, and then emerging victorious on the other side? Is there anyone in your family that you can look up to who's living that kind of life? Is there anyone in society that you can look up to that is living that kind of life? Because we are shaped a lot by the influence of other people, especially when we're younger. And depending on the kind of people around you, you can take off or you can be smothered. So again, taking responsibility, it's difficult, and we don't really have that many role models in society. That's why a lot of people turn to religion, and they see these masters in history, like Jesus, for instance, who really took responsibility and mastered it to such an extent that they completely took responsibility, no matter how difficult it was for them to do so. Taking responsibility is a very beautiful thing to watch, and it can be extremely painful also, but can also be extremely rewarding. And this is why we look at sports, and we admire sports. Did anyone see last year's Super Bowl? Yeah, I actually was fascinated by that game. I didn't see it live, but when I heard about what happened, I thought, oh my gosh, here's a team, the New England Patriots, who were down 28-3, 3/4 of the way through the match. They had 1 quarter left, and they were 3 points to their score, and 28 to the opposition. Now, most people would go, game's over, they're just going through the motions for the last quarter. But certain people on that team obviously thought differently. And as a team, they worked together, and they got to equalize at the final whistle. So then they had to go to overtime, and then they won. And it's like, it redefines the whole nature of momentum and taking responsibility, and we can fix the problems that we've caused ourselves in this match, and we can turn things around. Yes, we can, yes, we can, yes, we can. And they did it. So it's a beautiful thing for us to watch when we see a team of people or an individual, like a tennis player, like, say, for instance, Roger Federer. He was written off 5 years ago. That's the end of his career. And he's too old. He's in his mid-30s. Forget it. It's not happening. And now he's got like a second golden age. He's going out there winning championships. And now he has 20 Grand Slams, which is an incredible accomplishment for those of you who don't know tennis. But to see an individual taking responsibility for their own destiny and not listening to the naysayers and just carving their own path, it's a beautiful thing to watch. So if you see news stories about a company that's going bankrupt, and then a person comes in and turns things around, and the company becomes profitable, and the jobs are saved and whatnot, it's a beautiful thing to watch. People taking responsibility. Relinquishing responsibility is a trap. Now this is the trap most of us fall into, because that's the societal way. If we go back to our earliest ancestors, if you can accept the story in the Bible, Adam and Eve, they made a mistake. We're not going to get into what that mistake was, but they made a mistake. And then God asks the woman, what did you do? And then, first I think he asks Adam, what did you do? And his response is, it was the woman! And then he goes to the woman, what did you do? And she says, it was the serpent! And it's the way, the language in the Bible. It's like, it was the woman that you put in the garden, you know, deflecting responsibility, putting it back on God, your fault. And then the woman, it was the serpent that you put in the garden, not my fault. So we have role models in society. Those are the earliest role models, and that's how they behaved. When things go badly, you can always tell the character of a person or a company by how they respond. I won't say recently, I ordered some blinds from this company. Little plug here, blinds.com. And they sent the blinds, and they worked great. 1 year later, this big old blind in the living room didn't work properly anymore. So I called the company. They offered, some advice on how to fix it, and it didn't work. So I called them back and says, I'm sorry, but the advice you gave doesn't work. So they said, okay, we'll just send you a whole new blind. And it was a big old blind. It was 107 inches wide, blackout blind. This thing is not cheap. We needed it though, so we bought it, and they replaced it for free. So you can always tell the nature of a company by how they respond when things go badly. And you can do the same thing for people too. Do people say, well, it's not our fault and the warranty is expired, blah, 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 you know? Or do people take responsibility? So it's a trap though. Relinquishing responsibility is a trap. It's literally a dead end. So once you say it's not my fault, there's nothing I can do, then basically what you're setting up is, well, there's nothing you can do. You're in this trap. There's nothing you can do. It's someone else's fault. It's the government. It's the weather. It's my family. It's my wife. It's my husband. It's my children. It's my blah, blah, blah. Now what? You're going to wait for them to change to make your life better? And you know how that ends up. So taking responsibility, very, very difficult. If we can find good role models in society or in history that can show us the way to live, this can really help us to have the courage and the fortitude and the stamina to do the right thing even when it feels so difficult. So here are some strategies. I looked online, typed in some words about responsibility, and there's a couple of there's actually several TED Talks, TED, you can find online. Here's one by a guy called Stefan. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's Swedish. Anyway, so he has this interesting strategy. He talks about this experiment they did quite recently where they got a bunch of people and they put out some cookies and they set like a trap. And they told people before the experiment took place, they said, okay, I want you to say to yourself, I do not eat cookies. I do not eat cookies. And I want you to hold that thought for the next week. And they selected another group and they said, I want you guys to tell yourselves, I shall not eat cookies. I shall not eat cookies. And they set them out, and then they invited them to like a meeting, and it made it sound look informal. I don't exactly know the experiment, how they set it up, but they noticed that the people who they had taught to speak, I do not do these things, 64% of them were successful in resisting the temptation of the cookies. Whereas the people that they had taught to say, I shall not, found that it was only a 36% success rate. And they were asking themselves why. Why language, the way you teach yourself, is important. And it turns out that language is very important when it comes to reprogramming your mind and your brain. And so he decided he had a problem. He lives on a boat with his wife and his child, or at least he used to. And he noticed a while ago, well, in fact he didn't notice, but his wife pointed out to him, he says, when things go wrong, you swear so much And you put up such a fuss when you fix things that none of us want to tell you what's wrong with the boat. Because we live in absolute fear of all this noise and this disgruntlement that you're putting out. So he's like, oh, I'm sorry. She says, well, then can you stop it? And he says, oh, sure. So he tried to stop it, and then he notices the steam coming out of his ears, and he's really irritated. He really wants to swear out loud. And then he realized, I can change this. So he made a script for himself. And this is what he wrote down on a script. And he recorded it on his phone, and then he would listen to it every day. And the script goes like this. I only focus on things I can change. I'm never worried. I'm good at solving problems. I like challenges. Problems are my teachers. They help me grow. Without problems, I would not be going anywhere. Problems are important to me. Problems are not a problem for me. So he says, the funny thing is, he says, your mind is very honest. And for the first 10 days, your mind is laughing at you. Going, oh, right. But he persevered. He persevered. And that's important, because when you try to set yourself up and change aspects of your character, you'll find a lot of resistance. You will not have noticed this resistance before until you try to change yourself. And then you'll notice it. Just like the wind, you don't notice it until you start running, and then you feel the resistance on your face. So in this way, he set it up. He would read this to himself every day, like a mantra. And then his wife came up to him about 2 months after he started this exercise. And she said, are you okay? And he was fixing something at the time. He said, yeah, I'm fine. She says, you were singing while you were fixing. So he had gone from swearing and cussing and spreading his negative energy to now enjoying it to the point where he was actually singing whilst he was fixing. So a simple strategy of reprogramming yourself. Another strategy put out there by Marissa Peer. She's a psychotherapist, I think, psychiatrist. Anyway, she noted 4 things we need to do to collaborate with the mind, the way she puts it. First of all, tell your mind exactly what you want. Be very descriptive. Secondly, link massive pleasure to accomplishing that which you want. So you have to use your imagination. You have to almost imagine that what you want has already happened. And it's such an overwhelmingly positive experience that you're having. Thirdly, link massive pain to staying the same, not accomplishing whatever it is. So in other words, imagine 20 years later, you haven't changed that aspect of yourself at all. Imagine what your life would look like if you keep on going the way you're going and you know what you're doing is wrong. Imagine the pain, the disappointment, all that stuff. And then also she says, make the unfamiliar familiar. Change the pictures in your mind. Change the words. So that ties in with the previous guy. But for instance, Roger Bannister, for those of you who don't know, he was the first human being to record it running a mile in under 4 minutes. People up until then considered that to be an impossible feat for a human being. Human beings cannot run 1 mile in under 4 minutes. It's just impossible. Everyone has tried. All these expert athletes from around the world have tried. It just couldn't be done. And people were on the verge of just accepting that as a physical reality. Human beings just can't run that fast. Well, Roger Bannister had different ideas. He was a student at Oxford or Cambridge, one of those places. He was training to be a doctor. He understood a bit about mental images and the effect that has on your physical body. And so he would just program his mind to imagining finishing the race in under 4 minutes and celebrating. He would go over the finishing line again and again in his mind, finishing under 4 minutes. And then he did the run, and then he did it. And then after he did it, this is the interesting thing. As soon as he managed to break that barrier, people could then wake up to the idea that it could be done. And in the same year, 8 other people ran under 4 minutes. The following year, I think it was double that. And then now it's just like, oh, you can run a mile under 4 minutes? Yeah, big deal. You know. So it's, I mean, it's just a basic, you know, if you want to go to the Olympics and you can't run under, you know, a mile under 4 minutes, forget it. I'm sorry, you're not going to win anything. So, what was I going to say? Okay, so having that kind of image. Michael Phelps, his coach, used to teach Michael Phelps to run videotapes of him going through the motions of his race. Especially when he was nervous, he would say, play the video, play the video. And then Michael Phelps knew what that meant. It means just stop, close your eyes, imagine what you need to do. Think about your job, going out there, swimming, turning, going back. Just go through the motions in your mind, and then physically you follow through with what your mind is dictating. So, words from our founder to finish off. True freedom is premised on taking responsibility. If everyone insisted only on the freedom of love for each individual and put this into practice without taking responsibility for it, how great would be the confusion and catastrophe resulting from it? The perfection of human beings who will be able to achieve the sublime ideal of love is only possible when they take responsibility for love. Please join me in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to be reminded of our position in the universe as co-creators with you, to create our life, to create our family, to create our society, to create our world. You've given us the blueprint of what it means to be living in an ideal world. It is up to us to choose to do so. You will not interfere with that choice. It must be our choice, otherwise it is not a choice at all. Heavenly Father, please help us to understand our power, our vitality, our ability, that together with you we can actually change ourselves. We can actually improve things to the point where we can start to live with you in our hearts and minds 100% of the time. After we can accomplish such a feat, there is no limit to what this world can accomplish. Right now it's difficult to imagine because it hasn't happened yet. But in the future we can imagine that if people, more and more people, can live in unity with you, it will not become such an abstract concept anymore, but rather a living goal, a living reality. So help us to have the courage and the fortitude and the ability to tap into our inner resources. Help us to have vivid dreams of what it means to be living with you. Help us to have that sense of imagination and emotional connection to that goal. And help us to live our life so that we can really be the kind of people that you can be with all the time. We thank you and we offer this prayer through Christ our Lord, our Jew and our man.